F1 Manager 2023 has been out for a few weeks now, and it's a heap of fun. It's an engrossing game to play, and there's a bunch of stuff that's been done really, really well. There are, however, a few things that I think F1 Manager could have done better, including a few that drove me to the edge of my sanity. So today I'll be going through 7 things that I think could have been improved in F1 Manager 23. So before I go into F1 Manager 23 and what could have done better, I think it's important to know my experience playing the game because it really influences what I liked and disliked. Last year, I was fully engrossed in F1 Manager 2022. I was playing as Ferrari, and while some of the game was a bit rough around the edges, it was really fun. I enjoyed my time and I went on to win every single race for the entire year. It was very easy, but fun, but very, very easy. So this year with the updated game, I decided to give myself a challenge and I picked up Alfa Romeo, deciding to give Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu a run into the midfield to try and pick up some points. What happened though was, well, things didn't go so well, but we'll get into that a little bit later. To start off though, my number one thing that could have been improved on F1 Manager 23 is the on-track battling. The game as a whole plays a lot better than F1 Manager 22, and we don't have the sort of DRS trains that we used to have. The field likes to spread out a lot more, and it tends to look a lot more like the actual F1 races we see in real life. The AI is also a lot smarter with their strategy decisions. They'll actually run the faster strategy and get their drivers to push when they don't need to save tires. They also react quickly to virtual safety cars, weather, and actual safety cars. But the battling on track still looks kind of janky. I know it's just a visualization, but I often have my drivers defending down the middle of the road when the car behind is like a second and a half back. And once a battle does get started, it goes for ages. I ran an entire lap of Jeddah just too wide with another driver. An entire lap just side by side in a Formula One car. I imagine it's actually quite hard to do, but I would really like to see some realistic looking attacking and defending in F1 Manager. Football Manager looks kind of janky sometimes, but I actually think it does this quite well. The defending, attacking, and shots on goal actually look kind of how it looks like in real life, whilst in F1 Manager, they're not quite there yet. Have you played the new F1 Manager and have thoughts on how the battling and everything looks on track? Feel free to let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you're enjoying the video, you can leave a like as well. So I mentioned Football Manager before, and there's a vibe there that I get that I often don't get in F1 Manager, where you spend hours looking at stats and making background decisions, but when the game actually starts, you have very little control. Which brings me to my second point. Maybe controversial, but I'd love to have an option to be more hands-off in my role as manager. In real life, it's not Christian Horner that's looking at the numbers and deciding between a 2-stopper and a 3-stopper. It's the race engineer and the strategists. And I sort of wish that was possible in-game. You can simulate the practice and qualifying sessions, and the game does okay at this, apart from using every single tire set that you have available, but it's not possible to simulate the actual race. Maybe an unpopular opinion here, but my favorite part of the game is telling my team what to do, hiring and firing, building parts, and not actually calling the strategy mid-race, and I wish that was possible in F1 Manager. My third suggestion, and this one's been talked about a fair bit and already started to get implemented, but I would love to see Formula 2 and Formula 3 included in the game. I'd love to see them playable, and I would love to start as an F2 manager and work my way all the way up to F1. The issue with this is that you can't really create any parts in the lower formula as they're spec series, and you're sort of just working with whatever drivers come to you with the money to pay for their seat. But it would be cool to get the basics of setup and some limited strategy down before going to Formula One. Suggestion number 4 is being more clear with the weather. Maybe I'm asking for a bit too much here, but the current ways of working out the weather for a race are these tiny little icons at the top of a strategy screen and a squiggly blue line that shows how much rain is going to fall. But what does the squiggly blue line actually mean? How much rain is there? There's no scale. And while this is kind of fun, the fun of strategy, not knowing how much it's going to rain and dealing with changing weather conditions, I found it quite frustrating to deal with in game. I had a recent race where the blue line was only very low to the bottom of the screen, so I thought it was only going to rain a tiny bit and I could make it through on slicks, but by the time I worked out the squiggly blue line actually meant a lot more rain than I had thought, it was too late and I missed the window to pit for wets. What I'd love to see for rain is the implementation of a weather radar. Honestly, shouldn't be that hard to implement and it would help our understanding of the weather a huge amount. Gran Turismo 7 has a weather radar and it's pretty good some of the time, so it can definitely be done. Suggestion number 5 is where we start to get into my frustrating experience managing Alfa Romeo, and that's dealing with traffic. Finding clean air in qualifying is hard sometimes, and getting out of the way of other cars is tricky, except it's actually really not that tricky. It's 2023, F1 drivers, they have mirrors, they have radios, and they're smart enough to get out of the way of another car if they're coming up on them on a hot lap. Incidents do happen where drivers don't see a car coming up on them and get in the way, but it's pretty rare. It maybe happens once every 1 or 2 race meetings. But in F1 Manager 2023, it happens 100% of the time. If your car is coming up on a slow car, it will be slowed down every single time. The AI in the game isn't smart enough to get out of the way on the straights, and while they do sort of go slowly through the corners, your own drivers will get super spooked and hit the brakes if they need to pass them. What this means is that getting a lap in qualifying is half incredibly precise skill and half luck. You need to make sure you let your car out of the pit lane where they're not going to immediately get passed by a car on a flying lap. But as soon as they finish the lap, we'll hit the brakes and slow your car down. And you need to cross your fingers that nobody exits pit lane in the 20 seconds before you start your flying lap and get in your way. It's infuriating and it's a lottery. Sometimes my drivers have made it deep into qualifying, getting clean air, and sometimes they'll get blocked on like all 3 runs in Q1 and not advance. And I would love to see this improved in the next game. My 6th suggestion also gives a bit of a hint of my experience with Alfa Romeo, and that's where I wish it was possible to hire pay drivers. Formula One is a very silly place, and while some drivers are on the absolute big bucks, some drivers are paying their way onto the grid, either by themselves, their dad, or more commonly, through some big personal sponsors they have. If you're in financial issues, I'd love to be able to go to some drivers and ask for some money for a seat. That would be great. Also, and this was a gripe in F1 Manager 22 as well, but every single driver in the game wants money, which just isn't true. If you're playing as Haas and you go to hire Clement Novalak or somebody, he's not going to say no, you know? You can offer him $20 and a can of Coke. He's going to say yes, it's a seat in Formula One. Why would you say no? But in F1 Manager, you'll start negotiations and suddenly he'll want to get paid $1 million. And I'm like, really? You're probably paying $2 million to go race Formula 2. Are you really going to turn down like no money to race in Formula 1? It's infuriating. My 7th and final suggestion needs a bit of background, but basically I wish there was a way to tell your drivers to stop crashing. So my Alfa Romeo save was going great until the end of May in my first year. We were developing a bunch of new parts, I had built a new facility or 2, and I had brought on Liam Lawson as a development driver. I also had about 10 to 15 million in the bank, lots of money, nice and comfortable. But starting from the Austrian Grand Prix, they started crashing. Valtteri crashed in practice at the final corner at the Red Bull Ring, and Joe did the exact same thing in qualifying. 2 written off cars. Frustrating, but it's fine. But we went to Silverstone and Joe did the exact same thing again. At this point, I'm starting to stress. We've had to build 3 extra cars in the space of 2 weeks and we've used all our engines. So now I'm having to spend an extra 4 million on a gearbox and an engine every time they fire their cars into a wall. We move on to Hungary and I'm carefully going through practice with some cars that are built with some old parts that we have in the factory. Valtteri leaves the lane for his second run in free practice 2 and immediately shunts the car.
Safety car. Just focus on the data now, stay positive.
Joe also picks up damage in the race, and now I'm full on panicking. We don't have any new parts, Alfa Romeo only has a small factory, and I can't create parts as fast as they need them. Also, because I've had to build 5 new cars now, we're in debt, And the game isn't letting me build parts the normal way. I have to emergency create a new tub and some wings just to get them on track at Spa. We make it to Spa though, and we're going through practice with our Frankenstein together automobiles, and on Valtteri's first lap in qualifying, he writes the car off at Lake Hume, and he's
Red flag.
Let's see what happened there. Now this was Valtteri Bottas. Oh, and there wasn't a lot that could be done to avoid crashing into the barrier. And that...
I'm done. I have to spend like $15 million in emergency part fees just to get him on the grid, and now we're so far in debt, it's a disaster. We get home from the track and I am immediately, relievingly fired. My suggestion here is I wish it was possible to tell my drivers to take less risks. There are options to not take risks during a race, which are great. You can tell them to take no risk on passing moves and defensive moves as well. But 50% of my crashes happened in practice and qualifying where there's no control at all. And I'd love the option to tell the driver, like, hey, we have no money. This is the last wing we have. Please, for the love of all that is holy, do not crash the car. So yeah, those are my suggestions for F1 Manager 23 and what they could have done better. Do you also think there are some things that can be fixed for the next one? Feel free to let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you liked the video, you can leave a like and you can subscribe to Overtake for more racing and sim racing videos. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.